there's nothing in depth about that. There's nothing thought provoking. There's nothing, even creative about that. I think that's gonna then yeah, why can't a computer system do that? I think it's completely reasonable. But on the other hand, I think marketing is really about the originality. I mean, marketing by itself, by definition, somebody once said that if you know it's marketing, then you're not a good marketer. So it's constantly on that edge of trend, and that trend relies on understanding human behavior and where culture and people are at. So I think it still comes down to that people to people relation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spotlight Sessions, where we bring in top players all across the industry and we talk about topics that are very relevant to our agency owners. Today, I have Jim Liu, who's from Vegas, and he is someone who's an expert in our space around the AI component. And we asked Jim to come in and have a conversation about AI in general, and we'll go into our topics and things like that. But before we get started, Jim, give us a quick intro of where your journey started and your story and how we got here.
Sure. Thanks, Paulson. Yeah, my name is Jim, and I'm the CEO of SEO Vendor. We started this company in Vegas about 20 years ago. And so we've, definitely been around the block as far as our history goes. Within, I would say, probably about the last 7, 8 years or so, we've really been getting into more so on the technology side of things, looking into AI tech, and these days that has just really blown up. So we kind of wanted to share our story and kind of let everybody understand what our agencies, we work with a lot of agencies on our side, all through our white label programs, and so we talk to agencies on a daily basis. And so there's a lot of information that we can share about that, and love to talk to you about it.
Absolutely, Jim. So I do know when it comes to AI, some of the conversations that we had was to organize this session around 3 ways to gain from the age of AI as a marketing agency. And some agencies, they're just, in a sense, they're a little frightened about the idea of AI, and some embrace it in a positive way. First of all, can you lay the landscape down for us when it comes to AI for an agency? Like, help us understand how to view this thing.
Well, sure. Yeah. So there's actually several different kinds of AI or AI components. And I mean, the one that a lot of people always want to talk about are, the chat GPT, sort of the generative AI. But there's actually also other sorts of AI as well. There's what you can consider kind of the smarter end of the scale. You have generative, and then you have neural network based AI, which work more or less kind of like our brains, our minds. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have something really simple. You could look at something that's just purely predictive AI, or something that's more algorithmic. Maybe it's just based on a more simple model, just rules-based kind of AI. That's also an AI. And we deal with both, and we've also been helping companies with both as well. The key thing is that when you have these different types of AI, people sometimes come to us and they say, well, what if the AI decides that they're going to do their own thing? They're not going to want to follow what you're expecting them to do, or they're going to strike, and then it just completely goes into left field. And we kind of have to understand how the technology works, what's actually capable, what they're capable of, what they're not capable of. And so there is all that.
Absolutely. So will generative AI replace search engines? Like, I know that's one of the biggest things that a lot of agencies look at. I know a lot of copywriters, they love using it, ads folks. I'm sure SEO, you might know more about that than I do. I'm sure SEO folks are now looking at AI as a resource to maybe even get organized. But will generative AI replace search engines?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because we get this all the time. And you have some people that think that it's over, SEO is done, it's dead, it's killed. But then again, we get that kind of conversation about once every year or so, that topic comes up. You have other people who say, well, there's nothing to worry about, because generative AI and the way that searches are going to happen in the future is changing anyways. So you have search engines like Bing and Google who are getting into generative AI. Some of it is still, the exposure is still limited. Some of it is really getting into sort of the daily search of things. And so we have to kind of look at both aspects. On one hand, you have the introduction of systems like Bing, which once they introduced generative AI into their systems, there was a lot of commotion, but then afterwards there wasn't a whole lot of after effect, at least not as much as I think people expected. And nowadays you also have a lot of commotion around Bard as well. And the way to kind of think about it is, well, let me first explain. So Bard is sort of the name that's been given to Google's generative AI. And I think recently they've also changed it to a slightly different name. I think they called it like generative search. But the basic principle is still the same, is that imagine today, if you wanted to ask a search engine, you wanted to ask it, where can I find a bird feeder? Just a product, and just looking for a product. Chances are you want Google to return you the results that are product-based, or where it's something where it's easy for you to find the information that you're looking for. Whereas if, say, you wanted to know, well, give me some ideas for brand names. And so a search result isn't going to be very conducive towards that. It's just not, because unless somebody had an article that was just, hey, here's these brand names, but then that's static. That's a piece of static information that's not going to change. Whereas a generative AI could come in, fulfill that search, and say, well, I'm going to give you the answer based on your specific criterias. And those criterias are going to be very different. It's going to be a very different answer that I'm going to give somebody else.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So are SEO agencies not necessarily concerned with this whole idea of AI affecting search engines? And in other words, they're more embracing it, from what sounds like what you're saying, and they're looking at ways to be creative and expand their services with AI. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think search companies, SEO companies, kind of have to. I mean, we have no choice. Essentially, the direction that the industry is going in is definitely going to introduce AI and more of that into it. And it goes beyond just kind of fulfilling the fillers, meaning the blank areas that people don't search for. Right? I mean, if we think about it, today, if we were to go onto Google and you search, pretty much we kind of rely on autocomplete. We kind of rely on just, oh yeah, that's what I'm looking for. So I'm not even going to finish what I'm typing, because I've already found something I'm matching. And Google's kind of like that, because that helps with efficiency, with categorization and indexing and all that good stuff. But it does limit down variation. It actually does. What generative AI did is actually turned that into the complete reversal. And we've actually gone in a direction where search variation is just going to explode. It's going to be a complete explosion. And that actually could mean opportunity. And I think we got to look at it that way.
Interesting. So, there's a lot of agencies outside of the SEO or search oriented service providers, right? So like, I know one of the common questions we get around AI is, can a robot really do all the things that a marketing person does? Like, is there a world where we should be concerned, in a sense? as an agency altogether. So the creative agencies, the branding agencies, the advertisers, the paid guys, like what's the outlook that you have for the non SEO agencies?
Yeah, so this is also quite interesting because in marketing, it's very much a people to people type of business. So I would say we're still far from the days where, here's Bob, and Bob has a face, he's got hands, he's got arms, he's got 10 digits, and he could type super fast, and he's basically an android at that point. So I think we're far from those days where we can sort of link some type of personality to a specific bot or their actions and whatnot, and compare them directly to human actions. However, we are at a stage where we kind of have to set a different perspective, because there's a lot of things that for example, for writers, for creativity to a certain extent, and I say to a certain extent because there are still limitations, but a lot of what people originally thought was impossible or would take a very long time for artificial intelligence to come in and be able to do those things, they're happening now, right? And I've also seen plenty of high-level videos that are introducing that type of technology into the systems, because they work to help and to assist, especially with content creation, especially when to even draw ideas from that, that it's able to help out in those areas.
Yeah, and so in other words, we're too far in the early stages for it to be a problem, honestly. But agencies are using it. I know a lot of branding agencies are using it for creative ideas. A lot of folks, they use AIs as a foundation. Like, they'll do research with it, they'll get ideas from it, even our copywriters, sometimes they'll get different angles of the same exact copy, just to see the different approaches. So I think it's still a research oriented type of mentality, because they still feel like the human side has to be there, and the emotionality is not just there yet, right? So the sensible way that we think about certain things is not going to be there, obviously. So do you see an existential threat from AI for the industry as a whole, or you don't?
Well, yeah, I mean, one way I think we can kind of look at it is, are certain jobs going to be affected? Certainly they are. But I think we have to kind of also remind ourselves. I remember looking at a very old picture, where I think it was like back during World War II. So this was very far back, where you had rows of people that are doing file cabinet work. And this is essentially what is today a database. That's really what it is. And except we store now an unimaginable amount of data. But I don't think we are going back to what that was and saying, okay, you know what, that was being replaced by a computer system now. And those people have now completely lost their jobs and they have nothing else to do. I don't think that's the case. And I think especially in the marketing industry, we are constantly retooling ourselves anyways. And we kind of have to do that. Meaning if the job security was dependent on something as simple as data entry, or what I call the no thought writing, right? Like the type of writing that is just like, okay, just take this content and just put up a summary, right? Where there's nothing in depth about that. There's nothing thought provoking. There's nothing, even creative about that. I think that's gonna then yeah, why can't a computer system do that? I think it's completely reasonable. But on the other hand, I think marketing is really about the originality. I mean, marketing by itself, by definition, somebody once said that if you know it's marketing, then you're not a good marketer. So it's constantly on that edge of trend, and that trend relies on understanding human behavior and where culture and people are at. So I think it still comes down to that people to people relation.
Yeah, and also, in what capacity do you use HighLevel today when it comes to AI or even SEO? Like, give me an idea of like how you leverage HighLevel today.
Well, so high level in our world, because we deal with marketing funnels. And inside of marketing funnels, so for example, we have individual components, for example, like an SEO dashboard or a PPC dashboard. But a marketing funnel kind of consists of, you've got sort of your front end, you've got lead generation, whether that's coming from ads or whether that's coming from SEO. So you have multiple traffic sources that's coming in, and then you have a system where the information after it comes in, it gets collected. There has to be a point of collection, and there has to be also a point of retargeting. So that point of retargeting could also come in the form of like an email. You're sending out emails, an email system. So what we've seen, like for example, with the system that was developed at high level, is that it puts everything together, and it does it in a visual form that customers can see it. Agencies can look at that and say, okay, I see everything that's going on now, and I can configure everything that's going on, and I can set up these workflows, and I can then duplicate off of these workflows. So that's been highly productive in developing, because imagine before that, like for example, we have no plans for such a system. Uh, but with a system like that in place for a funnel, then there are KPIs or major KPIs that customers can see directly, and it seems more tangible that way, right? I mean, besides the results themselves, of course, you got to you got to actually get them sales. But besides that, what do they actually see is actually going on, and that kind of represents the work. I think that's sort of the advantage there.
Got it. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest common uses across the board for HighLevel, right? We are the back end system of a lot of front end systems that marketers put together, whether it's through paid ads or search or whatever. We are very much in the trenches of the nurturing, the lead nurturing or the follow up. Like, I've seen people build out sequences that are 2-3 years long in an educational fashion, and it's just an ecosystem that they push all their leads through. So Jim, before
Yeah.
we close out, like, help me understand one more thing here. How is AI merged into your use of HighLevel today? And I know that's one of the biggest things we talked about, is how AI affects a lot of agencies. I'm curious of like how you've embraced AI in your agency.
So, our AI development is actually in-house. So, while these days, this past year or so, there's been a lot of hype around Chat GPT technology and GPT technology in general. But it's actually also based on what's called based on neural networks, is really what it's based on. And neural network technology goes way back. It goes way, way back. So for what happened was that about 7-8 years ago, we understood that there's a lot that goes into AI analysis. You have Google adding in new criterias, new conditions every day. There's 200 to 300 different factors that deal with rankings. And so a project would literally take hours upon hours just to get one set of analysis done. And then if things change, then you have to go back and redo all that analysis again. So we thought that one solution to that was that we have to develop an AI system that can constantly keep up with those changes. And essentially, that's what it did. It basically brought down hours upon hours down to the order of minutes. That's the power of AI, is that increase in productivity. It didn't necessarily do the work any better than a person did, and it's not making any decisions. So it's not like it's in full control of an ASAL campaign, but it does provide enough conclusions and analysis for the SEO analysts, the experts to then go in, take advantage of that, and then be able to then execute off the right decisions.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting because What it does is reduce a lot of overhead and reduce a lot of time and delay of results, right? And also you probably are more accurate in those analysis typically. So Jim,
Right.
how can agencies work with you? Like help us understand how, if they have an SEO project, like how can they jump on, or do you do other projects outside of SEO as well, maybe? But can you give us insights of how they can reach you, how they can work with you?
Sure. Yeah. So we are mostly working within what's called a white label model. So that's very similar to white label to what HighLevel has, is a white label model. Basically, agencies that come to us, they essentially take our service, they brand it under their own brands, and everything from the dashboards to the reporting, everything is all there. And then if there's, say, like for example, a high level component, then that all gets integrated into one system. And we, while we started out as given our company name SEO Vendor, but we actually do work on a number of PPC and development projects as well, just because you're in the space, you're in marketing, and you just end up having that experience anyways. So that's pretty much how we then got to sort of the marketing funnel. And so now it's kind of more dependent upon the needs of each individual agency. Every agency works a little bit differently with us, and so we just look at the components that work towards their needs, their benefits, and we kind of then take it from there with them.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing a lot of insights here. Anything that you may want to share around the AI component, as the age of AI is getting louder and louder for marketing agencies? Anything that they should know? And I know a lot of new, fresh folks that jump into the marketing journey also watch this show, and anything you might want to highlight for them will be definitely appreciated.
Sure. Yeah, I think that certainly there's a lot of concerns around AI and AI safety, and I completely agree with that. It doesn't mean that we don't need to be cautious just because they don't have arms. But on the other hand, we if we take a different perspective from an opportunities aspect of it, then we can also look at AI as kind of like the next calculator, which calculators are so common these days, no one even thinks twice about them. But they used to be imagine if you were, 70 years ago, that is the AI, that's that gap. Like today we look at it and say, wow, AI, it's so phenomenal. And back then they were looking at the calculator, and schools were banning it. Schools banned the calculator.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a great analogy. Calculator, we thought it was gonna at one point, I think, replace accountants, right? Replace bookkeepers and replace anybody that's in the math space altogether, or even the college professors to begin with. Like, we don't need to be educated on this anymore. But that's a great analogy, Jim. And I know a lot of high level agencies appreciate conversations like this. And we certainly appreciate you jumping on and doing a session with us here.
Hey, absolutely. Yeah, you're very welcome, Paulson. I'm glad
Okay.
to talk to you as well.
Yes, absolutely. So if you're brand new and if you don't have a high level account, jump in and jump on a 14-day trial or a 30-day trial to a pro account if you want to. But either way, it's at highlevel.com. And if there's anything else we can do to help, let us know. Jim, again, your link or your website link, or how can they get in touch with you real quick?
SEO Vendor, just go to https://seovendor.co, and you'll find everything about us there.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Jim. Have a good rest of your afternoon or morning, actually, I might say. It's early for you. So we appreciate it.
Yeah, it
Take
is.
care.
All right, take care.